your essays, I think I know yours, and we can talk about that if it's meaningful to you, because that's actually what the college essay process is about. It's about you, and it's about your idea. My background, I am a teacher here. I'm an English teacher, and it's my first year teaching, actually. I was a student teacher here last year, and in my other life, I worked in the admissions office at UVA, but only as an intern, not as a proper decide what your future will be admissions dean. But that allowed me to be on the process, the viewing side of the process, and really see what deans were saying about essays, and really seeing that an essay can make or break an application. There's just so many people applying to colleges these days that if you have a good essay, you can lift yourself up out of the mob. And come on in, get yourselves comfortable. I just figured I'd start. So it can't really hurt you, an essay. A bad essay isn't going to get you an X, but a good essay will get you in, right? So I witnessed a few really exciting conferences where a student was right on the edge, right on the border, and the deans at UVA, and every college will do this completely differently, but the deans at UVA would bring up the essay as the strong point to get that student in and say, this sounds like a really neat person, and we want them here contributing to the community. Forget about all the other metrics. This sounds like somebody we want to get to know. That said, the other metrics are probably more important for getting you into that room, right? So the very first question we'll address is, this is you. You're sitting down to write the essay, and you want to be that person in the room being talked about, being admitted to your dream school or whatever it is that you want to go. But then this happens. Nothing. What do you write about? How are you supposed to write a personal statement about your life in 500 words or less? This is the crisis that everybody hits. Senior year, or maybe earlier, and you really want to stand out, but sometimes you're trying so hard to stand out that it's really difficult to know how to. And there's no magic answer, but I can give you some advice that will hopefully make the process a little easier. This workshop isn't about topics, it's about techniques that you can use. I will not tell you that there is something you can write about, because there isn't. Sometimes basketball could make for the best essay anyone's ever read, and it could also make for the worst. It's not about the topic, it's about how you write about the topic. It's about who you are on the page, and how you take an experience that means something to you. You show the world what that is. It's a very meaningful, personal experience, and that's why it's so stressful. Okay, so do essays matter? Let's go back to the admissions process. Yes, they matter. And really at this point, I'm going to be lifting a lot from the UVA dean that I talked to last week, who came to talk to the seniors about whether they matter. And I'll echo a lot of the exact same things that she said. Yes, they absolutely do. But if you're going to get into the school anyway, then maybe not. If you have a GPA that's above the middle 50% of the students applying to that school, if your SAT scores are above the middle 50%, if you are, in short, a fit for that school, then the essay isn't, again, going to hurt or help you, really. You're already probably an admit, and that's not going, this essay isn't going to change that for you. But if you're like most students, not sure if you're a sure fit anywhere just because of the numbers these days across the country, then yes, the essay could lift you up, as I've said already. Okay, moving on. What shouldn't you do then? We'll do what shouldn't you do, and that what should you do to get in. That's what this is all about. But when you're writing these college essays. And I'll do the don'ts first, because the do's are so much more uplifting and a good way to end this session. There are some things that you shouldn't do. There are some general rules that are not going to help you at all. And there are really 5 kinds of essays that you shouldn't write. And I'll go through them one by one, and I'll take questions along the way if you have them. The first one is something that a UVA dean called a MIC essay. A MIC essay isn't bad. A MIC essay isn't good. A MIC essay just sounds like every other kind of essay everywhere. His analogy that he continues to use is, if I go to a McDonald's in Nashville and a McDonald's in Charlottesville and a McDonald's in New York City, they're all going to taste the exact same. Those Big Macs. So a Mick essay, it sounds the same as every other essay ever written. And this is a lot like the second kind that you shouldn't write, a 5-paragraph essay. That is what we've been taught to write as English students. I train 10th grade students to write 5-paragraph essays, absolutely. It's an important academic skill. It is not the kind of skill you want to use in a personal essay. This is about showcasing who you are, not going through the 3 things that make you exactly who you are as your English teacher might approve it. And this is hard for students because this is how we train you all to write in any fashion. We don't really go into vignettes and we don't really go into extended metaphors on your life. We're trying to train you for the workplace, train you for college, train you for the kind of formal writing that you need to be doing to be successful as a student. But this is not about that. This essay is not about you being successful as a student. This essay is about you showing who you are as a person. It's a very different thing. So imagine the essay that starts basketball. Basketball has made me who I am because it teaches me leadership, perseverance, and what's another cliche I hate to say? Teamwork, right? You know the rest of the essay. I don't even have to tell you how it goes. And this is what an admissions officer just doesn't have time for. They're reading 35 of these a day, and not just 35 essays, 35 applications. So they don't have time to read all of an essay that they know the ending to already. So you want to surprise them, and this just doesn't do it. Neither does the Mick essay. Then there's what they call the Disney essay, and the Disney essay is, in short, just a string of cliches. That's all. It's like the other two in that it's somewhat predictable. And often it has to do with a life-changing experience that a student had. So, for instance, perhaps you went to Haiti on a mission trip. That's amazing. Write about that. But don't write about it like this. One of the best experiences of my life was when I went to Haiti on a mission trip. It taught me that everyone in the world really has the same needs, and we're all kind of the same. I met a lot of really wonderful people who were really great and showed me that life is beautiful, and I was so blessed to be there. What I've just uttered is a string of cliches. Don't write that. Write about a specific time you had in Haiti, a specific moment where that cliche became real to you. Unpack it, give us details, sensory items, imagery. Give us the name of a person that you met. Tell us what they looked like. Describe the hand of the kid that you held. Go into details. Make it real. Make it exciting. Write about Haiti. Just don't end and begin with the cliche, right? That is what they're used to. So again, it's not going to hurt you, but if they pick up an essay and it says, one of the greatest times I had in my life was when I volunteered to help the homeless, they're going to put the essay down. Say, right, okay, got it, check. You want them to read your essay. It's the key here, okay? Blue soup essays are the opposite of that. It's when students, this is a reference to Bridget Jones' Diary. I don't know if anyone's seen that movie, but she tries to make a really fancy meal for her friends with lots of really complicated ingredients, and decides at the end to make this soup that requires her to tie up some herbs in a satchel with some twine. Well, she doesn't have twine. She's not really a cook. She's just trying this for the first time. So she uses blue string, and it turns the soup blue. So she has to serve this blue soup to her friends, this fancy soup she tried to make that looks ridiculous. And it's fine because they're all friends, but the point is, if you try something that you're not comfortable with, if you're trying on shoes that are too big for you, if you're trying to sound like you have a dissertation in anthropology, and you don't, it will come across. And you don't want to sound fake, you want to sound like you. This is part of the resource I'll hand out later, and I'm going to read a little excerpt of it that actually Ms. Lennox read last week at the UVA talk. And I'll read you this paragraph so you can get a sense for what I'm describing as blue soup, as something that is stretching a little too high. reaching for words that don't quite fit in this student's mouth, okay? From an early age, we accept death as the inevitable, but do not comprehend its actual denotation. Death is the impending future that all people must eventually grasp. In my early teens, my grandfather tragically perished. As a youth who did not identify with such a cataclysm, I was saturated with various emotions. Initially, I was grieved by the loss of a loved one and could not understand why this calamity had to befall upon my family. I always considered death to have a devastating effect, but was shocked by the emotional strain it places upon an individual. That doesn't tell us anything about this student. This is blue soup, trying on words that just don't sound right. It's like every fourth word, the student hit right-click Thesaurus Synonyms and was searching for the words to sound big, to sound philosophic, sound like yourself. That's what this comes down to. Instead, tell us personally why the death of your grandpa, in this case, really meant something deep to you. Give us a specific memory. Talk about when you were on the sleeping porch with your grandma in his rocking chair and you were playing cards and he said something that you'll never forget. Paint the scene, make it real. Bless you. That is how you avoid blue soup. Just don't be someone you're not. This is all of those cliches you hear in life tied up into an essay. And in many ways, it's the most important thing you'll write because it is trying to showcase who you are, not just to the admissions counselors, but to yourself. So that's why it's, again, so stressful. And then finally, this is where I have to be careful. Don't let your essay die in committee. This is something that Ms. Lennox said that I thought was great, and especially as an English teacher, I have to be careful. Don't give your essay to so many people that it gets torn apart and becomes something that you are not. Maybe it started as you, but you get your mom to read it, and your dad to read it, and your sister to read it, and your English teacher to read it, and your guidance counselor to read it, and your friends to read it, and by the end of all of it, the original essay is gone. It's been lost in pieces. What you should do is read it out loud to someone you know well and say, does it sound like me? And if they say, not really, then you know you probably have to go back and try again and do something from the heart. But get general feedback. Get grammatical feedback. Make sure you're using the contraction properly. Things like that your English teacher can help with. But be careful about soliciting too much advice. In fact, I have a stack of essays, including Whitney's, that I'm not going to mark on. Instead, we're just going to sit and talk about the essays in intervals where students tell me what they're feeling and whether or not they like the essay, and that will guide the conversation rather than change this, add this, move that around, because that's not what this is about either. Okay, so that's what you shouldn't do in an essay, generally speaking, and it's me in a committee dissecting your thoughts already, but they're good guidelines. What you should do, and this is a lot easier, actually, what you should do. Distinguish yourself by being yourself. That's all I have to say. And I'll continue saying it. Tell them who you are. Be descriptive and specific. The examples I'm giving you are intended to be specific examples to show you the kinds of things you can write about. Not topics, but how you get at those topics. Kinds of things you can say. And one really good rule of thumb when you're trying to be descriptive and specific is pick a moment that meant something to you and then just brainstorm about that moment. Color it in with all the details you can remember. Unpack that moment. And then at the end, try to extract why it means so much to you. That's a great formula for an essay, if there were a formula. Add imagery, okay? That's breathe life into the essay, give it some color. And yet be concise, that's attention. Tighten up your language. Your English teachers and adults that you know can help with that too. Just make sure you're using as few words as you can to say what it is that you mean, partly because of those word limits. You have 500 words to summarize your life, or 500 words to describe the book that really influenced you. You don't want to go on and on and on and on and on about the plot, for instance. You want to tighten up that language. And I'm going to continue saying things like this. Use your own voice, not someone else's. The structure of the essay, the good essay, it doesn't have one. If there were a structure, everybody would do it. And the admissions officers who read 60,000 essays in a lifetime would have read 60,000 of the same essay. So there is very decidedly not a structure. You cannot write it in a wrong way. You cannot start with the wrong part of the essay. You just have to come up with your own creative way to do it. Yet there are a few things all good essays have in common. Start with a hook. Convince your reader to keep reading. Make sure that first line has punch. In journalism, this is what you have to do to maintain your readership. Treat it like that when you're writing those essays. Pretend like it's being published on the front page of the New York Times. How are you going to get the person who's in Kansas sitting for their morning coffee to read that article? It's the same thing here. How are you going to convince the reader to keep reading? Because as I've said, they don't have time to read essays they already know the end to. Okay, and I've said this a lot, write about a specific person, place, experience, specific thing. Not a feeling that is broad and encompasses many different experiences. Unless you can make the case for it. And end it well. When you've given it to that person to say, does this sound like me? Also say, does it feel finished? Does it come together? And that's a pretty strong sense readers have. That feeling you get when you know, oh, yes, turn the page, I've finished. You want your reader to have that feeling. Okay, so put yourself in their shoes, and this is what I keep saying. Imagine this, your application is spread out across the screen of the admissions team. They are going to pick up your essay. They have a minute and a half to read it. They're going to read it, put it down, keep moving. That is how it looks. They are not going to sit and think about it and write things on in the margins and circle things and mull over it. It's not going to happen. They just don't have the time. They're not your English teacher. They're going to put it aside. So what feeling do you want them to have about that experience? What's the feeling you want to leave them with? Did they love it? You can't know really. You probably won't know. But a good question to ask yourself is, do you love it? That's a great sign. If you have written something that you are proud of, chances are wonderful that it is a good essay that is spoken in your voice. You won't feel that way if it's cobbled together by a lot of other people and you feel like you've been staring at it for months and it hasn't grown. You'll just be excited to get it off your desk. Do you love this thing, this idea? And it really starts with the idea. And sometimes it takes a really long time for the idea to hit. And by really long time, I mean weeks, not years. And advice that I generally give is, it sounds so new agey is probably the word, but I'm a big fan of David Brooks, and he wrote a book called The Social Animal, and talks a lot about how we think when we're not aware that we're thinking. And the best thing you can do about this is start early thinking about the idea that you want to encompass, or the ideas, because you might have to write several essays. So just start the thinking process. You do not know when the epiphany will hit you. It might happen when you're running, it might happen when you're in the shower, it might happen when you're sitting in math class. But you owe it to yourself to begin the thinking process so that you can start mulling over it. Because there's nothing worse than staring at that blank page. It doesn't have to happen in that moment. It might happen later. Just do yourself a favor and let the struggle happen. There will be an idea at the end of the struggle. It always happens. Always. Okay, so that's really all I had. It's not about the topic, and if y'all are curious, we could talk about some things that you have on your mind. How many of y'all have started writing your college essays, besides Whitney? Anybody else? You're probably not sure what you want to write about yet. Maybe you've thought about it. I'm going to give you a couple of examples that I wrote about. Whitney has already heard these. Just to get you thinking in the way that you might want to go. These are not prescribed success stories. I wrote these college essays. I did get into the school I wanted to get into, but, could have been the essays. I loved my essays, though. I really felt good about them. And that spoke to me as I turned them in. So one of my essays I wrote about was, when I was little, my sisters and I, we put a chocolate chip cookie stand at the end of our street instead of a lemonade stand. We thought we'd sell chocolate chip cookies one day. And we didn't sell a single cookie all day, and we were out there for hours. But it was mid-July in St. Louis, and nobody wants a chocolate chip cookie in the heat. We just didn't know that. I was 6 years old. And so at one point, there was a jogger running by, and I ran after him and said, "Here, just take a cookie for free." And he said, "I don't want your cookie, kid." And it was burned onto my brain as this really powerful memory of failure and of being talked to like this by an adult who was so disgusted by my idea. Until that point, people have been so supportive. You can do anything you want to do. You can sell cookies in the middle of July. It was a growing experience for me as a 6-year-old. I wrote about that. I mean, talk about lack of giant event. It doesn't have to be giant. You just have to use details and be specific about what it meant to you. Be on the page there in front of them. It's your chance to talk. The only chance you have in your essay, so use it well. And that was my essay. So, any questions about all of this as I wrap up my spiel? Anything that's troubling you, or?
What's the difference other than length between the two essays, the Common App and the supplemental?
It's really, it depends on the school. Are you talking
So
about
say
UVA?
UVA, say UVA and
UVA's got,
Or Common App University,
like-
right?
yeah, and Common App, they look at those essays the same as they consider their own. The questions they ask, they're really I think they're kind of residual from the past. They love asking those questions. They are a shorter length. They're trying to get a short, snappy piece from you. And if they're trying to give you a little bit of a chance. If that Common App essay just didn't speak to you, if that prompt wasn't hitting anything in you, this is another opportunity to tell them a little bit
So
about.
the 500 words has to do with the supplemental?
That's $250.
It's $250 for the supplemental. It's $500 for UVA anyway, and every school is different. But the Common App is $500. I think also a lot of the supplementals will try to get at your personal interests. They'll try to tap into, okay, so why do you want to go into science exactly?
What's your
not
comfort
just-
food, I think.
Yeah, that's UNC's, right? What's your comfort food and why? I mean, so I don't know what they're trying to get at there, except they're trying so hard to throw you a bone and say, please be fun, please have fun with this. We really just want to, yeah, they're trying to help themselves out. Oh, good. Okay. Well, we've got enough time for me to do exactly this. I'm going to give you this resource that was written by a UVA admissions dean who's no longer there. It's called Writing the Essay, Sound Advice from an Expert. This was published years ago in U.S. News and World Report, and it takes you through a lot of the examples I've mentioned. It's really a great essay to consider before you start writing, or after as a revision tactic. And he gives you 3 examples of a good essay, a bad essay, and a risky essay. And if you want to hear more in this vein, the talk given by a UVA admissions counselor here Wednesday of last week is on the College and Career YouTube channel for MHS. So just type MHS College and Career, and you can find Macy Lennox talking in this way about the college essay. You can always have it at your fingertips if you ever need a refresher or inspiration. And then this is all the UVA perspective, and the good news is UVA does a good job, I think, in this video and when she spoke to us and taking a step away from UVA and saying this is college admissions in general. So it's kind of the same themes everywhere, but check out your individual colleges and how their admissions boards work too if you have specific questions about the essay. I'm going to hand this out to all of you, and then I'll be around for questions, especially if you want to talk about your essays in general. Here's what you're thinking. Okay, great. Very good.